I want to welcome everybody to my interview with experts series. This is my new format, so just bear with me. I'm always a little difficult with change here, but I'm happy to have all of you here, and I'm so delighted that Bruce Frankel is my guest. And I'm Dori Mintzer. I'm host of this series. And I know many people over, I'm getting into my 14th year now, have said, why not change to Zoom? So we're ending 2025 with Zoom and we'll continue with Zoom going forward. Let me just turn my phone off here. Sorry. There. Um, so I am just really delighted to have you here. Just for those of you who are new, generally we meet on the fourth Tuesday of each month at 12 noon Eastern time. And we will be starting to do that again in January. And I have a wonderful lineup of people. So, I look forward to having all of you with us. Today is an exception. Bruce was scheduled for September, but due to the illness of my then virtual assistant, who has just been wonderful over all these years, I needed to do a rescheduling, and I'm so delighted, Bruce, to have you here. So in a moment, I'm going to introduce Bruce. So a slightly different format here in that the chat is available, so people can ask questions or make comments via chat. And if it's a question, it would be really helpful if you put a Q in front of it, so I'll know it's a question and I'll be able to integrate it. I still have everybody, and I would like all of you to be muted, just because there's background noise, and I think it just makes it easier. And so we're just going to kind of feel out this new platform that we'll be using today. And it's so nice to see people's faces, people I haven't seen for a while. So it's quite nice. So let me just go ahead and just a quick overview. Sign up always is the third week of the month, and there's always a recording afterwards, and that will continue. And I also have, as many of you know, a podcast series, and this interview will become part of the podcast series also. For the podcast series, you go to www.revolutionizeyourretirementradio.com. And then when you get to it, just click view all, and you can scroll down, over the years for all of the interviews I've done or the podcasts that are out there now. To sign up for this program, you go to www.revolutionizeretirement.com, and you'll be able to sign up for that. So I'm delighted you're here. You'll all get a recording later. And without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Bruce Frankel, who's been a dear friend and colleague over many, many years. Bruce, as many of you know, is a journalist, author, ghostwriter, and positive aging advocate who at age 75, after a major cardiac arrest in 2024, has returned to writing poetry. And I'm so delighted that you've made this transition. I've heard a few of your poems since then, and it's heartwarming and wonderful. He's a former senior writer at People magazine and a national reporter for USA Today. And he wrote a best-selling book, What Should I Do with the Rest of My Life? He also co-wrote World War II, History's Greatest Conflict, and co-edited Live Smart After 50. And the Live Smart After 50 was a compilation of Life Planning Network members, and a really wonderful book that's sort of still very, very timely. So I encourage people to order it and read it if you haven't already. He's the past president of the Life Planning Network and co-founder of Redstring, and he stepped back from his leadership roles to write. His poetry has appeared in the Los Angeles Review, the Great River Review, Big City Lit, and other publications. And I also know, Bruce, that you've had many different scares in life, and I know that after if it's okay to say, because I know you've said it before, after a cancer diagnosis, that sort of motivated you to, I think it was around that timing, maybe you can fill us in, to you went back to school
Yeah.
and got your master's in fine arts and specializing in poetry. So
Yeah.
you're really a kind of a both a thought leader and a role model of this whole mid-age and beyond and second half of life. So Bruce, welcome. I'm so delighted that you're here and with us.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to be with you and to have this chance to play a little, and
Great.
to share some of what I've been thinking and doing. In terms of the illnesses, I listening to you, I was kind of thinking, well, if I'm a cat, I maybe have 5 lives left because I've escaped a few times now. So
I was going to say that, you at least have 9 lives, if not more. So
yeah, the events in back in 1992, I was then just 42 and I had cancer and was treated for it. And that was simultaneous with the first World Trade Center bombing, which I was covering at the time. I was diagnosed. And within a week, I had the first World Trade Center bombing, my diagnosis, and knowledge that my third son was going to be born. So
it's
it was a
talk about the
packed week.
circle of life. Yes, right. Oh
But
my.
I survived, and I that as I've said in other occasions, at that point, um, I realized that I had been more afraid of leaving reporting, which was my identity to a certain extent, to a large extent, to what I wanted to do, which was write poetry, and then I was scared of the cancer, and it took me about a year and a half of therapy to make the move and leave. I mean, it was just excruciating, and I thought I'd cured it forever, and I went back to school. I got into a MFA program at Sarah Lawrence, was in heaven, felt like Alice in Wonderland, having slipped through the hourglass. Well, actually, that came a little. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. I went from the cancer 10 years later, I should say. Um, I had my first heart event and survived that and made the decision to get my MFA in poetry. And, I keep it's, and then after that, I wrote a couple of books and was well on my way. I was teaching poetry at the time at SUNY Purchase and made a decision to take a job that led to Red String. And I needed the money, so I took a job. Then life took off, and poetry got left behind again. And it's hard. I was thinking about it this morning a little. Time just goes so fast. I mean, I can't believe that it's 20 years since I finished my MFA. Um, And, I thought I had a book well on its way then. And, so when in February of 2024, uh, I was at the gym and got off of a treadmill after doing my normal 30-minute run. And I apparently died. I had a cardiac arrest and had no pulse, and an angel of a woman who was a phys ed teacher who the day before had finished her CPR retraining, jumped from her machine and onto me and started administering CPR and mouth to mouth. And uh, the people at the gym managed to call um, the emergency services. They came, they got me to the hospital, they put me in a coma for several days. And I woke about a week later at Harvard at Brigham and Women's with a quadruple bypass and a aortic valve replacement. And the first things that I thought, other than my sons were in the room and Leslie, my partner, was in the room, the first things that I thought about, other than just being happy to see them, was the sense of um, I had work to do that I had to do that I had left unfinished. And um, I kind of made a declaration to myself that I was going to do everything I could to get better and that I was going to change my life. This, as I said, not the first time I've said this. It's a, I used to say about teaching, I have three sons, all now grown. Um, I used to say, you have to tell children the same thing many times and hope and have faith that at some point it will take. I kind of think that's true for me.
Well, I'm certainly glad it's taken. And I mean, I do remember as a friend and colleague just knowing about what happened to you and sort of following it and just, I mean, you have work to do. It's not your time yet to leave this world. So,
Yeah, and so it's been when Dori asked me to if I wanted to do her program with her, um, I said I do, but I don't really want to do it on what I've talked about in the past. I want to do it on the adventure of turning to writing again and um, taking on a creative life. And in a sense, I feel like, this, Dory said to me before, you're a guinea pig in this program. I said, you're a guinea pig for me because this is all adventure for me at this point. Um, when I agreed to do this, I had um, really just made a few attempts at really writing poetry again and um, hadn't gotten very far. But I've really been working at it daily now, and it's kind of crazy to feel how those things that you were told your whole life, if you show up for the muse every day, the muse will show up for you, how that begins to happen.
mm,
And so it is, and then there are all these aspects of devoting yourself to your craft and your art that I think also start to that you realize you're a different person than you were the last time that you did this. The last time I devoted, you realize that age does make a difference in how you see the world. Um, I think I have a deeper objectivity is one of the things that's beginning to become clearer. Um, it, my sense of how I'm perceiving the world is not as romantic as it was 20 years ago, or certainly not 40 years ago, but maybe a truer romance because I really do love the world and really do love this being in this life. And because I know what it feels like to have that jeopardized, I think I come to that feeling with a deeper reverence.
it's so beautiful the way you say that. And it does make me realize, I mean, I've always said it, and it's not the same as a physical thing, but I had a near-death experience in my 20s, and when some stranger saved me from drowning, and for me, it just changed my life. It was a pivotal turning point of just knowing you don't take life for granted, and I think it's really true that knowing that we all are going to die, and we don't necessarily know when, really does make life more real, more precious. And as you say, the kind of the wisdom and experience that has come now from before. I was also just thinking way back when I was doing my Boomers and Beyond SIG, you did a poetry and aging program for us. And it was, I think maybe there was a little bit of some writing you had done, but it was more of other people's poetry.
It was, and
Yeah.
I thought about a lot of those poems, and I thought, well, you know, one of the interesting things actually is the poems. A lot of the poems that I read then were by poets, um, many poets that I knew at the time, many of whom are now dead. 20 years later. Poets that I studied with that were my mentors who are also now dead. Um, and boy, in particular, I just thought of my favorite poem of that pack was one called Lucky by Tony Hoagland, and he died a couple of years ago. So it's not just your own, it's your sense that this world of people that I esteemed has changed. And so I related to that. I thought, started thinking about poems that I might want to read here besides my own, and started looking at some poems of aging that I hadn't looked at before. And a lot of I started looking at poets who weren't perhaps as hip as poets that I had originally looked at, or poets that I had maybe not paid much attention to in the past because they seemed a little more traditional to me, contemporary poets. And and I've been absorbing them, um, and then reflecting as I'm also been working hard at upgrading my knowledge of poetry. So a little like Rip Van Winkle, you go to sleep in an art for 20 years and you wake up and you suddenly realize a whole generation of artists have arisen in that time. Not just young artists, but people who maybe were in their 40s then and are now 60, but weren't known 20 years ago when I kind of didn't keep up to the degree that I had in the past. So there are just so many really wonderful poets out there, and also the field has dramatically shifted in terms of it was still maybe the tail end of the great white male poets when I was studying. There were, of course, already really great women poets, but it was still a kind of in a moment of transition. I think 20 years later, the field of poetry looks very differently than it did then. And so part of what I've been trying to do is renew my view of where poetry is today as opposed to where it was 20 years ago or 40 years ago. And I guess that also, thinking about the poets that I mentioned at the beginning, people even like, say, take John Updike, who published an enormous amount of poetry besides his fiction. He published regularly in the New Yorker his poems, but they were thought to be kind of light verse. His end poems, a book that he wrote called The End Point, is truly sobering stuff, and I thought I might read some of them. But or in even Margaret Atwood, who of course has written tons of people know her for Handmaid's Tale or her fiction, but she's a first-rate poet as well and always has been. Um, uh, she was an early important woman poet in the from the late 60s on. She became really important to women's poetry, but to changing poetry. Or Sharon Olds, another great woman poet. But I look at some of like some of Margaret Atwood's or Updike's poetry, and we're talking sickness, death, loss. If sex emerges for Updike in those poems, it's as a guy who's kind of leeringly looking back at the life that he had. And and I juxtapose that a little in my own mind to my own project, which is, I think, going to be somewhat different, which is about renewal, because I feel like I was reborn. I feel that this is the second chance, the third chance, fourth chance I have is, and I guess one of the things that I would just mention about my current project is that the book that I'm writing is going to be both poems of rebirth in a sense, but also I have behind my house a vernal pool. I live on a beautiful pond in Massachusetts, in Sharon. But right behind our house, we have a couple of three or four vernal pools, and one in particular, the larger one. And vernal pools are ephemeral pools. They have no natural in, inflow. They fill with rainwater or snow, and each year they die out, or they dry up. And um, I've been looking out this window at the vernal pool for a couple of decades and never really thought about it very deeply. It's hard to believe that you can be so uh, I don't know, dull to what I'd see it, I'd say this is beautiful, but I didn't really stop and think about it or investigate. And then so one day after, as I was recovering, I thought, well, I wonder what goes on out there in that muck when it's mucky. And I started to read and began learning about it and have contacted ecologists to help me understand it a little. And one of the great discoveries has been the fairy shrimp. So each year, when the pool dries up, and there are these so-called fairy shrimp they have invisible shells, carapaces, and so you can't really see them unless you know what to look for. And they deposit their eggs, the females, that are cysts, they're hard shells, and they drop into the pool, and they drop into the muck, and they will stay there until they decide it's their time to emerge as new fairy shrimp. That could be this spring. Uh, Individually, they choose their own time, I guess. Or it could be 2 years or 5 years, or it could be 50 years or a millennium. Um, and that has become something of both a metaphor and an observation. So, like understanding that there's this relationship between me and that pool is fueling. So, in a sense, I guess what part of my experiment in all this is that I have found something that feels forward looking. I would say, I think I froze. It'll come back. It's not you, it's me. I think my system just froze for a second. But
Okay.
at any rate,
We're still hearing you, even though
yeah,
you're
yeah,
frozen.
it'll pop back. It just, I don't know
Yeah.
what it is. At any rate, so that's become an exciting thing for me. I mean, Leslie, my partner, absolutely thinks I'm bonkers, I'm sure at this point, because I have been obsessing about the fairy shrimp, and I spent my entire weekend reading about the sex of fairy shrimp, how to how to differentiate the sex of fairy shrimp, how do shrimp have sex. Um, so that became
And what have you learned? And what, I
I
mean,
learned
I
that.
think there's a poem probably
There's
that's come
definitely
out
a
of
poem,
it.
but I'll give you the prose version of Sex and Fairy Shrimp. So there's definitely a poem, and it hasn't happened yet. And then maybe I'll read a few things. But so the female fairy shrimp, they live a very short period of time. They're only alive for
Oh,
a couple of weeks, a few weeks.
oh.
Fairy shrimp emerges. The female and male can be distinguished because the female has a little hump on near what you'd call her head, and it's called the saddle. And in the saddle carry the unfertilized eggs. And when she is ready, she sends out her pheromones. And if a lucky guy fairy shrimp is in the neighborhood and he's ready, they have um, antennae. One of those antennae is kind of like a tusk, a fairy shrimp tusk. It's long and he latches it around her, um, and their union is brief. But he deposits his spermatozoa, sperm, and and then she passes the eggs through
uh,
um, the her sac, and
uh,
they get fertilized and dropped, and then they become cysts and dropped into the muck for the next generation. So it's really it's quite amazing,
that is,
quite
yeah.
amazing. And who knew that was going on in my backyard all this time? I had no idea what was going on out there.
Uh, it took your rebirth. It took
It,
your own dying and reborn to appreciate this millisecond of creation, I guess,
it,
is
it
what
did.
I'm hearing. Yeah. Wow.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm happy to talk more, but I thought I'd read
Oh,
some
it's
poems, but
wonderful. Please. Yeah.
I thought I'd read first a couple by um, some people that I love, and then I'll read some of my own. So, um, one poet with whom I studied, Tom Lux, who died in 2017. Tom was one of my great teachers. Um, he he was probably the best poetry reader. I won't try to imitate him because I'd only make it silly. But Tom went to Emerson in Boston, and he was from Massachusetts. His father was a dairy farmer, um, and I studied with him at Sarah Lawrence. And sadly, he died in 2017. And he had gotten cancer toward the end. He wasn't that old, obviously. Um, and he wrote this poem called "Ode to the Unbroken World," which is coming. It must be coming, mustn't it? Churches and saloons are filled with decent people. A mother wants to feed her daughter, fathers to buy their children's things that break. People laugh all over the world. People laugh. We were born to laugh, and we know how to be sad. We dislike injustice and cancer and are not unaware of our terrible errors. A man wants to love his wife. His wife wants him to carry something. We're capable of empathy and intense moments of joy. So, sure, some of us are venal, but not most. There's always a punch bowl somewhere in which floats life's a bullet, that fast, and the sweeter for it. It's the same everywhere. Slovenia, India, Pakistan, Suriname. People like to pray, or they don't. Or they like to fill a blue plastic pool in the backyard with a hose and watch their children splash, or sit in cafes, or at a table with family. And if a long train of cattle cars passes along West Ridge, it's only the cattle from East Ridge going to the abattoir. The unbroken world is coming. It must be coming. I heard a choir. There were clouds. There was dust. I heard it in the streets. I heard it announced by the long hailers mounted on trucks.
Mm.
So that's Tom. Um, and I have one other poem here by Tom I wanted to just read if I can.
I could listen to you forever, Bruce.
Yeah.
You were saying, I just, every time I talk to you, it's just, and you keep turning me on to new poems over the years. So, yes.
Uh,
Oh,
I do
yeah.
Tom's one and the other one. Oh, here it is. Um, so, sadly, again, this has to do with his in a bit to do with his recognition that he was dying. It's called Blue with Collapse. The devil's in my neck. Everything I hear is over violined, even the wind, even the wind. It's like walking in nurdles up to my chest. squeaky and slow. It's spring. The blooming branches nearly hide the many dead ones. A squirrel digging for a nut upends my frail tomato plant and fails to replant it, even though he has the tools. I find this kind of squirrely oblivion everywhere. I was a man filled to the top of my spine, filled to the lump on the back of my head with hope. Then I read a few thousand history books. Little and nothing perturbs me now. Even the beheadings, even the giant meat hooks in the sky, more frequent each day, bother me not a tittle, not a jot. Sad poem. um, and let me just read a poem by um, a couple of women too. Where'd my screen go? Well, this is by my friend Laurent Beausolar. Um, and Laurent, uh, I never really studied with Laurent. We just became close. She's a wonderful poet who came here from Belgium about 40 years ago and learned English and writes really beautiful poetry. She was kind of the Oprah of Belgium at one point, not as big a market. But this her husband was a poet, um, Kurt, who I used to correspond with and I was close with, and he also died shortly, not long after Tom died. Um, any rate, so this is a poem that she wrote. She and her husband Kurt had moved to California, and pretty soon afterwards, he had this calamitous health event. Um, so this is called Late Afternoon Strolls on the Cliffs by Laurent Beausolar. As usual, death sweetly slips her arm in mine, and we take a deep breath from the eucalyptus breeze. We both worked honestly at our jobs. All day, death destroyed traffic with wailing ambulances, while I killed hours and lines on 8.5 by 11-inch pages. We're fast friends by now. Death much older, of course, but there's no hierarchy between us. We're both taking a break from it all, glad to watch waves collapse on the rocks and pelicans dive bomb fish. I try to be sensitive to death's guilt, the whole pandemic disaster she can no longer control. She'll soon betray me too, like she will you, I know. But today, the gulls are silver angels etching great cursive blessings in a perfect sky. So death and I make believe we believe that and amble on.
Mm,
It's- she
mm,
wrote a beautiful she's got a couple of new books, but her book on Kurt, she put out a chapbook that was called Rooms Remembered, which is one long poem, really.
mm,
A beautiful little book. And, as I think poets are privileged people um, because you know, when you enter into a society of poets, they're people who know how to feel and know how to say what they feel and are open in that. In fact, when people don't really write poems, when you work in a poetry workshop or something, and um, I don't know, you really have you feel like you have an obligation to bring something to the page, and that's different than the rest of life. You know,
Mhm.
we go through
Mhm.
so much of our lives hiding what we think, experience, feel. So I'll just read
That,
one. Go ahead. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
but I was just gonna, but I want to have you read more, but is that part of, when you were talking about sort of your rehabilitation, I guess, or the renewal and rebirth and deciding to really leave so much of what you were doing to write. I mean, it just does sound like of just realizing, how much you have to share and how much you're feeling, and somehow giving yourself permission to say, if not now, when, I guess.
Yeah, if not now. But it's not that I mean, I don't feel that. I think the magic of poetry, and I think Frost said this, no surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader. And so I certainly don't ever think I know anything. And I think that's true, been true for me my whole life, that I think it's why I became a reporter, was because I didn't really think I knew anything.
Mhm.
And so every day was an adventure in which I woke up an idiot and went to sleep at night an expert and woke up the next day an idiot again. Um, and I think that's how I, I kind of approach poetry too. I don't have any expectation that I really know anything. And then if you're lucky and you can get your ego out of the room, um, things emerge. Whether it's the muse that speaks to you, or the page that speaks to you, or dumb luck that speaks to you. Um, I don't know. I mean, I've been reading, one of the things that I've been reading on the side is the French uh, philosopher Simone Weil, who she was Jewish, but her writing is particularly esteemed by Catholics because she wrote about Jesus and Catholicism. She was an amazing mind. She was brilliant at the Sorbonne. The war broke out. Her parents and she fled first from Paris to Marseille, and then um, her parents were able to get past passage to come to the United States. She didn't want to go. She wanted to stay. She identified with the workers. She wrote about labor and worker issues, and she identified with them. And she didn't want to leave, but her parents wouldn't leave without her, so she did. And shortly after, she went back to England, where she worked in the resistance from there. But she died in 1943 of malnutrition. But her writing is quite amazing. And I've been reading. She wrote about something in her that she called decreation, which is, I won't try to go into it completely because I don't think I fully understand it, but it's a little like the Buddhist concept of getting rid of the ego, that we can't exist. We can't even exist for God until we remove our ego, until we decreate ourselves. So I've been thinking about that in relationship to poetry and to what it means to renew oneself. How do you renew yourself if you have to decreate yourself? What does that really mean? But again, in some ways, it goes back to this idea that so much of our lives we compose ourselves to present something to others. We believe we know what we should be presenting, and we orchestrate who we are, and that isn't who we are. I don't know if anyone has seen Jay Kelly, the new George
Yet.
Clooney movie.
Yeah. It's
Um,
it's actually, I'm going to be seeing it this weekend. I mean, it's streaming through December, so
yeah, I
so
mean, it, it's a very interesting movie to think. It's beautifully made. I can't say that um, it's a movie. I don't think it's a movie that's going to be wildly popular because
mm,
I think its subject matter may not elicit that. But I've been thinking about it's really a story about ego. It's a story about how we do things because be um, we want to be something in life, and that's the whole problem is that instead of being humans, we want to be something, and we get lost in that venture, and so and that's part of what I woke up to too is recognizing that um, when you're living in the creative life, you're living in this existential moment. You're here, you're observing. To me, the beauty of poetry is that it requires attention. The beauty of reading poetry is it requires attention. It and unlike social media, perhaps it requires attention. And to me, attention is prayer. So this is where it becomes religious for me, is that, well, I don't think of myself as a religious person. I do think of my practices as a observing human as religious. So, yeah. Any rate, here's a poem. I'll read a few of my poems. I was going to read a couple by others, but I'll read a few of mine. So when I woke up, the first poem that I wrote with a little bit of humor um, is called Ode to Sudden Death. Last week at the gym, fresh from the treadmill and energized, I was heading to the weights when, with zero clownish intent, I pratfell up to the gates of Elysee. That's a clumsy way to say I died a sudden death. When the haze of coma cleared, when the nurses were done telling me how lucky I was, as they ushered me down the hall holding my gown like a bridal train. My brain wanted to recall unlucky deaths that made no sense to me. Praise Tennessee Williams, who stoppered his throat, sucking off a plastic bottle cap in his room across the street from where I worked. Praise to João Maria de Sousa, crushed to death when a cow fell through his roof onto the bed where he slept. Sweet dreams. And praise Canadian lawyer Gary Hoy, who, seeking to prove the 24th floor window of a Toronto office building was unbreakable, hurled himself at it as hard as he could, twice. No glass broke, but the window popped from its frame, and Hoy hugged air all the way to the ground. Case closed. Praise to the 7-year-old girl swallowed last week by a 5-foot deep sandpit in Lauderdale by the sea, and weep. As for me, a woman named Nicole blew air into my mouth, then beat and beat my chest, which surgeons later slit and stitched, deleting me from this ode, saving me to praise the act of living, a la mode. And staying on the death theme, this is a poem called The Plot, and this has to do with my obsession in the spring, this year of growing grass. And there's one word in here which is not poetry. The word is poesy, which is a type of common grass. This is called The Plot. Need a dotard to watch your grass grow, a coaxing fool. Why not call on me, whose head orbits over late April's greening lawn, planted seed by seed? A transplant myself, I've read fescue grows best in New England soil. I confess my head is practiced at being bent. Constant as the sun, we need to warm the earth and spread the rush of green across a breast of ground, brutalized by winter snow and blind plow. Have I nothing better to do? Some work for wife or wage or human justice. Something simple, say, as folding socks. My wife wishes it were true. My banker, too. Instead, I invoke my right to serve as spring's spy, to nurture cellulose with my eyes. In worship, I bow to each new blade and recite the recipe of poesy: carbon dioxide, H2O, sunlight. Photosynthesize, I pray. Bestow life on root, leaf, and crown. Begrudge me not. This plot is not yet my grave. And this is a poem I wrote fairly recently. Some of you may know Lucille Clifton was a great African American poet who wrote wonderful poems, particularly later in her life. She died within the last 10 years, I suppose. And she has a famous poem called, I believe it's Hips. There's a line in it, these hips are free hips, and it's about what her hips were capable of doing, particularly to men. It's a great poem. Um, so my poem is called My Hips Are Not Her Hips. And this relates to, I've, I've been suffering from um, a, uh, a bad hip and in fact, tomorrow I go for a cortisone shot. But ilium, ischium, pubis, those bony wings betrayed my boyish wish of flying on two clay feet uphill. The ball in socket game has brought me to a halt. My orthopedist explains the joints insulted, impinged, at fault. He traces the femoral head, x-rayed in its lunar crater. See, it's gone flat. Who knows when? Inflamed, it's stuck in the acetabulum. Yow! Anatomy's gorgeous rhythm. Acetabulum. What's pain when percussed bone on bone, ripe for marimba and Vodafone? Mm. And this is a poem called Wearing Out. Um, my partner, Leslie, gave me permission to read it. Um, and some of those, some of you may know, a couple of you may know, but Leslie and I went to high school together. And we were, I was friends, but not close friends. The evidence of that is that I signed her yearbook. She didn't sign mine. Uh, I was a little, I grew to be tall after high school, but in high school, I won the state championship at 95 pounds, and I was probably well under 6 foot when I graduated. So Leslie and I met again 40 years later after 8 months after the death of her husband, who was a physician here. And we've been together ever since for the last almost 20 years now. So this is called Wearing Out. Things are wearing out. The elastic of my wife's bra has little lift. My waistbands slip, sweatpants sag. Our back bends, plies, and headstands. They're less than acrobatic, not pliant. They're stiff. Still, we try to hold up our part, to nurture ourselves, oil each other well, play blind to accretions of deficiency, accept. Even as the microwave threatens to barbecue the house, hot tub thermostat and hers are out of whack. The boards of our little dam still hold, but warped they seep like our eyes, even as the pond's pure water declines and declines. So much exposed, girdles of rock that in wetter times preserve the illusion that nature was on our side, that we would take pleasure swimming naked and touching forever. Um, this poem's a garden poem, um, and it's composed. This one is pretty linear, as you can kind of see. I don't, not many of mine are like that, but in retreat and collapse, exemplified by leafless tomato vines snaking in lax, brittle gyre around thin weathered sticks, with 3 or 4 sun golds staring round like infant goblin eyes. Basil's robust September show gone brown and black. Peas that never climbed the teepee hunker closer now, and oval pepper leaves turn darkest green and point down. And yet he hopes another day or 4 or double that stays the end, as Japanese eggplants lay purple commas on the hay, and count them, the red geraniums flag October air, and 6 amethyst marigolds make a hearth against the dark. It's kind of interesting when you start to see the connections between what you write. Another thing that just I've been doing more lately is playing a little with form, which I eschewed when I was younger. I thought, oh, you can't do form. But I've learned that you can learn a lot from doing form, and you can, and doing form um, provokes your imagination in ways that you can't anticipate. So if you put certain requirements on what you're doing, you and you have to live up to it, you find out that, you know, a lot is provided to meet your mind. So this one is um, a modified pantoum, I guess, which is a form. Um, and it's called Bee Wields Her Stinger. The bee wields her stinger as she dances near your throat. You flick and flail to shoo her. Her wing beat grows still faster. As she dances near your throat, her buzz unnerves and hovers. You try but fail to shoo her. She wants to be your lover. She inhales your scent, she hovers. Small beauty trembles with fear. She will never be your lover. She wants what you'll never offer. Small beauty trembles with fear. Her hairy eyes are polarized. She wants what you cannot offer. She hungers with 5 eyes. Her hairy eyes are polarized. The bee, she wields her stinger. She hungers with 5 eyes. Her wing beat nears your ear. Um, yeah, kind of interesting. One of the beauties too of writing poetry is that you learn a lot. It requires a bit of um, investigation. If you want to read, where'd that one go? I seem to have lost my most recent poem. Anyway, I'll find it.
Okay.
We can talk a bit, and then or I can read some others. But
Well, it's so wonderful to both hear these and just how wonderful that you've allowed yourself to to take this time to, I mean, in a sense, I was thinking with one of your poems before, kind of creating this sacred space to feel and share and write and I was interested and wanted to ask, but didn't want to put you on the spot when you were saying it's interesting reading, and then the themes that you see or whatever. And I just wondered if you just even in the reading it and hearing yourself reading it, what are you experiencing right now, maybe? And the sharing is
Yeah,
amazing. Yeah.
I, I feel a certain amount of joy. I mean, I feel there's a little bit of, I guess, kind of bittersweet joy because I feel like I feel the good fortune of, um, let me back up. I've always felt like I was lucky. I always felt like I was one of the lucky ones. I had great parents, particularly a great mother. Um, I things happened in my life that I always felt, my career always felt lucky. The stories that I wrote a number of stories that were, you know, important and valuable, and I felt lucky in getting the leads that led to those stories. I felt lucky in the children that I've had. So, I felt lucky, I think it was you, Dori. I think it was through you I discovered the Life Planning Network. I believe I had contacted you. We're going back probably the early computer days. I was living in New York in my apartment on 110th Street. And I can kind of see myself sitting. I still have the same desk. I still sit at the same desk, but I can see myself sitting at the desk there. And I had just finished writing What Should I Do with the Rest of My Life, which, for those who don't know, is a book about people who succeeded in ways that I thought were significant after the age of 60. Um, they were they weren't my criteria in that book was not that the people couldn't be transferring prior wealth or prior knowledge. They had to be, in a sense, sui generis after the age of 60 and creating themselves. And um, I,
Wonderful book
I,
too. I mean,
I
but
felt
yeah.
lucky in finding the people that I found because they taught me so much. Um, they changed my life. I'm sure much more than I did anything for theirs. And as part of that, when I was writing that, I think I saw your program at the time, the early revolutionize retirement, I believe it may have been, and I reached out to you. And so we're probably talking well over 20 years. I mean, and you wrote me back and were very generous, and you introduced me to LPN. I think your book was coming out around then.
Right.
Um, so so I mean, I feel lucky
Yeah.
in the Life Planning Network. I found this community of people. Joan Ditzian is here. I'm looking at Joan and um, people who have enlarged my life that I couldn't have predicted that either. So in a sense, maybe sometimes I was never a joiner. I was a reporter. I lived apart because I didn't believe I should join anything. So it was the first time I'd ever joined a group. Um, and I learned a lot from that. So that was one of the reasons it was hard ultimately to give up the Life Planning Network, to give up leadership in it because it wasn't just an identity; it was a family. Um,
I can appreciate how hard and yet, it's kind of letting yourself come, I guess, full circle of just saying, this is who I am and what I'm feeling and I mean it's so wonderful your capacity to share it and your writing is it's beautiful. I mean your book is I think I think back to it of this. I still have in my head so many of the people you wrote about, because even just reading it changed my life, thinking of the sculptor or that couple who set up this incredible program that still exists in
It's an acting.
Massachusetts. So yeah, in Acton. And so that, it's sort of allowing yourself to, it's sort of really interesting to think about how creativity expresses itself in so many different ways. It's through your writing, but also through your leadership, in Life Planning Network, Red String, the various things that you've been involved in, and now kind of allowing yourself in the more intimate, sacred space of the sharing the poetry of dealing with, as you say, life, death, renewal, rebirth.
Yeah.
Um, it's
And
just, it's
it's
wonderful.
funny, you know, back when around the time that I met you, I remember one of the mantras that I had in my mind because my marriage, my long marriage had ended. It was a trauma for all of us in the family. I had been married for 27 years, uh, and it had been, a devastating loss. I think for each of us, my three sons and my wife and me at the time. Um, and I think at that time, looking for every way possible to say yes to life. I had also at that time just recovered from my first heart attack, having 10 years earlier had cancer. And so something you were saying triggered this idea of in me that of how much it's all about saying yes. Even all that, whether it's in an organization, doing an organization, or volunteering, or giving to your partner, or taking the time to um, go out and look at the fairy shrimp. Uh,
Mhm.
it's kind of about just saying yes. I want to do this, and what a counter thought was running though at the same time, which was how yes got me into trouble because um, it led me away from my heart's core, um, to doing things that were maybe I didn't know I could do. I'd never been on a board, and I said this the other day at a meeting. Um, Doug Dixon was on, and Donna Schaefer was there, and I think Donna Schaefer maybe she wasn't quite the president yet, but when I was first invited on the board, I watched these people who were, essentially my age, but they were schooled in how to be on a board. I had no idea, and I just watched and listened, and so I learned something by saying yes about how mature people conduct themselves to get things done. I had no idea. I really had none. Um, I was used to getting an assignment in the morning and chasing off by myself and doing the
Mhm.
work and coming back and writing in the office and thrashing
Mhm.
it out with an editor and going home and bitching about what they did to my beautiful story. And so
Mhm.
anyway,
Yeah.
it's and so it's a complicated thing, yes. It's like you sometimes say
Yeah.
yes and it turns out great. Sometimes you say yes and you find out it's led you down the wrong path.
But then to discover that, I think, and be able to recognize it or to make it be the right path. I always think of Ellen Langer when she said, make the decision be make the decision the right decision or something like that. We can't, and so, but then also being able to say, but it's time to go in a different
Yeah.
direction now.
I of
And,
course owe a lot to Ellen. She gave me the proudest endorsement of my book, and I had read her closely at that point, and so much of what she says, both because of the body-mind connection uh, in her work and her sense of um, our capacity to use our minds to heal our bodies, to not allow medical diagnosis to become the text of our lives. That she taught me that, and I'm ever grateful for it, as well as I am her blurb is
Right.
beneficial. But yeah, it's
Well,
yeah,
and you're talking about it too, the noticing, the being with, whether it be the fairy shrimp or the, and the learning, I mean, I didn't mean to interrupt your train of
I
thought, but
know,
just the way, I mean, again, I said at the beginning about this role model. I mean, you get an idea and then you pursue it and you want to learn about it and you research it and you write about it and you express it. I mean, it's just so beautiful and so inspiring. Um,
well, it's yeah. I mean, always a surprise to me, and I think that's the other thing is that if you allow, I think if you, my mother was a painter, or she was early on. She had a career in between. Um, some of you may know enough about her, but she was very young when she graduated high school in Brooklyn and became a nautical engineer at a time when women didn't do. She was the only
well,
woman nautical engineer um, on the redesign of the Panama Canal Zone during World War II. So, and and she was she taught me as well, and she went back to her painting late in life, and so I learned something from that. Actually, because of the holiday, when it's Hanukkah, and um, I have a poem here I wasn't going to read. It doesn't really fit in with the rest, but some I was going to read some of my. I have a poem that I adore called Vacuum, which is about my mother's obsession with vacuuming, but I won't read that one. But this is a poem I've been playing with for years, trying to get right. Um, and maybe it's right now or not, I don't know, but it is one of my earliest memories of Hanukkah. Um, and it has to do with my mother, who um, was out there. She didn't she was a tough cookie in a beautiful way. So this is called Still Burning, 1958. They called it winter in store windows. Mannequins in Florida, Madras vogued in styrofoam snow. Holiday lights blued the avenue's palms and ficus. The year was streamlined, finned, two-toned. The bougainvillea climbed our trellis with red fingernails. We celebrated the anniversary of the GIs taking Monte Cassino. Sun broiled our neighbor's nativity, and Santa sweated profusely at the bandshell as reindeer strained tinsels to escape the state. Our lawn stayed naked and green, till the Brody boy swat-stickered our house. Mother, her long hair in a bun, answered, nailing a Maccabee shield to a raw scaffold with gold dowels for 9 bulbs still burning. I apologize for tearing up and ruining the end of that, but I couldn't help but feel, how pregnant this is at the moment. Uh, you know, it's hard to believe that, here we are, a lifetime, uh, and it's still going on.
sort of an time goes so fast, and yet the repetitions of things and um, sort of the brokenness of the world. I mean, just even thinking you started with a poem called Ode to the Unbroken World, just sort of thinking about what is involved in learning. Wish the world could hear your poetry and think about poetry and have more of this hope rather than the destructiveness. And
Yeah. And it's,
yeah,
so in our faces and so everywhere. And, I guess I would say that poetry has always felt like an antidote to that.
yeah, yeah.
And it still does. I was thinking about that earlier this morning, instead of turning on CNN, which is my want, I sat with poems and felt, some joy about all this. And yeah, um, I I don't want to leave things there. I want to just this is so again another poem against death, I suppose, and this is I'll try to find another happier poem if I can. Um, this one is called The Best Endings, and again another uh, wonderful poet whose name was Dean Young, who was 5 years younger than I am, who died during the pandemic.
Mm.
The first line in this poem is a quote, and it's from Dean, which I answer in the poem. Um, the best endings are abrupt, you said. You died soon after, so we can't debate. I would have proposed the best endings wait for us to be saved. Breathe, damn it, breathe, she cried and cracked my rib cage. Punch by punch, she hauled me back. No bungee cord after I'd left the edge, throwing me from death's mosh pit alive. I drive around town now, perched like the spirit of ecstasy on a Rolls Royce. You'd agree, it's as good an ending as any to survive. Um, this is a totally different
Yeah.
kind of poem. This is also a form, uh, a modified form, and this goes to something I was thinking about the wonder of poetry and how of art and painting, how it takes you to someplace else. In this poem, um, I don't know if any of you know the work of Wolf Kahn, who was a gorgeous painter. This is, let's see, I'm not sure.
Mm.
Painted
Mhm.
these unbelievable colors,
Mm.
and he was a beautiful, beautiful painter. Um, and I love his work, and I've been thinking about it for a while. And I read this fall about, I was unfamiliar with, and some of you from Massachusetts may know the shacks that are part of the Cape Cod National Seashore, that are preserved, about a woman named Hazel Hawthorne Werner, who first went and stayed in those shacks, in one of those shacks called Thalassus in 1953, and preserved it, lived there, created another, and now there are these series of shacks. She rented hers there, and they remain important. Artists have used them over the years, and um, I I was reading about it, and I was thinking about what she saw and how she might have seen it, and began to think, if I saw it through Wolf Kahn's eyes, saw her story through Wolf Kahn's eyes, what would I see? And there was one story that she told at one point in her life about, and she was important in literary circles too. She knew everyone in New York. She introduced everyone to everyone. Um, but at any rate, Hazel um, Werner said back in the day, they'd only get one delivery from the mailman who'd come up the beach in a buggy
Mhm.
a day, and there were no stores to go to in Providence town or anything like that. And at one point, some oranges, which I get to them, washed onto the shore from, I guess, a ship that had dropped this cargo.
Mhm.
So that I referenced that. So this is called Hazel Hawthorne Werner at Provincetown, 1953. The world simplified through a revision of three planes, a geometry made horizontally plain and true, green, pink, and blue. We see what, in the summer of 53, you saw from that primal wind-battered shack through wavy salt-glazed glass, cataracts under a shuttering roof, rented at 25 a month flat. The sea is the field of pink from margin to margin, but with increments of blue stretched flat, sponging dusk's pink hue. And the low dune, a gentle chartreuse, you walked through it to the vacant beach, pristine except that once, when it was strewn with a cargo of oranges, all edible and good. And if the reference in that is, if anyone ever wants to look it up, there's a painting by Wolf Kahn called Pink Light on the Sea, which are just basically three beautiful planes of um, um, yeah.
Oh, Bruce,
Hey,
this has been, I realize that we probably have to
sorry.
pull it
Yeah,
together, but I would love to just go on and on and on. I hope you'll come back again. And, there has been a request, if I hate to give you more work, but would you be able to share an email of some of the poems that the poets that you read?
of course.
It was just, might all the poems and resources shared by Bruce be shared in an email?
Sure, I can definitely
If
share
that's
them.
possible, that would be wonderful. When are you hoping, will you have your book? Or, I mean, it's just so wonderful that you're just, I mean, maybe not even needing to think about it as a book, but you're just,
Oh,
I mean,
I'm
the
thinking about
poetry
it.
is, I mean, you did mention that it's,
Um,
that's the doing part, not even
yeah,
just the being part, but the
yeah,
doing
I'm
part.
thinking about
Yeah.
it, and I
Yeah.
joined, again, I know it's way over, but I joined a couple of workshops, and I hadn't
Ah,
been in a workshop in about 25 years. I joined one workshop taught by a wonderful young writer on completing a chapbook. So my goal is by April to have
oh,
finished a chapbook, which will be 20 to 35 pages, and it will be a single
oh,
theme, and I'll get that
wow,
published, I'm sure, and then to have a
wonderful.
book finished by the end of the year, by
Wonderful.
the end of
Maybe
next year,
end of 2026.
26, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my son Alex, my oldest son, who's a musician, and he left music about 5 years ago. He away from walked off stage and walked off out of his career um, as a very, he had a pretty good career for 20 years. And he went back and started, and it was part of what has been an inspiration to me, taking inspiration from the young, watching him,
Mm,
face up to his fears of not being able to do it. He's now
mm,
43, and he's no longer a 20-year-old kid. Um, So that's his album's almost done. His album will
Oh,
be out
fabulous.
in the
I remember
fall.
listening to some of the earlier ones
Yeah.
that come out.
So anyway,
Wow, well, maybe at the end of the year, you'll be our guest again. We could make a tradition of ending the year with Bruce Frankel and poetry. I mean, seriously, I might hold you to it. And you're a
um,
grandfather now, too.
I,
There's this whole other,
I,
yeah,
Moose.
of moose, right?
Moose is
Yeah.
my grandson's name.
So I don't want to end, but I think we probably need to. And what would you want to leave people with? And I mean, I'm serious about maybe thinking about next year.
Any chance that, one of my when I decided to go back to graduate school when I 20 odd years ago, whatever it was, I called up Marie Howe, became my friend, but she taught then at Sarah Lawrence. She won the Pulitzer Prize this year. Um, and Marie said to me when I said, I'm thinking of doing this crazy thing, leaving my job as a journalist and going back to school and doing this. And Marie said, come and eat poetry for breakfast. Um, so I learned from her, I'm happy to put poetry in the air any time of day,
Okay,
anywhere.
I'll hold you to that. Any final just takeaway that you want to share as we pull this wonderful
I mean, I
time
feel
to a
like such a
close?
simpleton around this stuff because really, I just want to say, it's about um, the one thing that I've learned is that things are possible, that we self-limit ourselves so much of our lives. We find all the crippling reasons why we can't, when in fact, half the time, all we have to do is open the door and walk through. I think I may have told you this at some point, but um, at one point when I was trying to make my decision to leave journalism, I had a hypnotherapist. I worked with a really brilliant hypnotherapist, and um, he, I had this idea at the time that um, I would use the phrase, "Can I jump off the ledge and do this?" And he said, "Let's rephrase that. Let's let's not talk about it as a ledge. Let's talk about it like you're walking from one room into another. Let's put it in,
We'll
and
safer.
that and the truth is
Yeah,
that is the choice. You're making a choice.
yeah,
You're not,
yeah,
it's not life and death.
yeah. But it's
Yeah.
saying yes, just what you
Yeah.
said before. It's saying yes to some things about yourself and your soul too.
Yeah.
And
Here's the last
so,
thing I'll leave you with. And at the end of the year, I'll definitely have some fairy shrimp poems for you.
okay.
And I don't know if you can see this picture.
Yeah, I
So,
can. Yeah.
so
Oh,
this,
yeah. Yeah, you
yeah,
held it up close.
yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that guy taught at Kent State, um, and he devoted his life to two things: studying swallows, swifts, and studying fairy shrimp.
What's his name? Just so for people who don't.
Um,
Oh, that's okay. I
it's
didn't
going to
ask
rush
that.
out of my mind.
That's okay.
It's
You
running out
can
of my mind.
when you send the email later, you can add his
I will.
name.
I'll do that. But I guarantee you, there's going to be a poem about. So he discovered, just last thing on the fairy shrimp to leave it on. He discovered, it's a sad ecological tale. He discovered a fairy shrimp in Florida that existed in only one pond, one vernal pool anywhere.
Hmm.
And then the developers came and filled the
Uh,
pool.
mm, mm. What a place to end. Bruce. Oh, you are a gift to all of us, and you are so special. And thank you for taking all this time today with us. And I will hold you so we all have the end of next year to look forward to, hopefully, some sense of hope and,
Well,
and
thank
a
you.
sense of
Thank you for the
good.
opportunity, Dori,
Well,
and
thank you
the
so much for
friendship.
being here. And yeah, I mean, I just so value our friendship and you. And I'm so happy that you're sharing yourself with all the listeners here, and you'll be part of the podcast too. So it'll be out in the world. So be well. Take
Be
care.
well. Happy
Yeah.
holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.